Dr. Kenji Tanaka froze mid-reach, the medical chart still dangling from his fingers. His daughter's voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the sterile quiet of the hospital room like a blade. He turned slowly toward her. 7-year-old Aisha Chen, a black Asian girl bundled in a fleece blanket with tiny cherry blossoms, sat up in her hospital bed. Her deep brown eyes, so much like her late mother's, were steady and unblinking. Kenji crouched beside the bed, brushing her curls from her forehead. "Sweetheart, what did you just say?" "She gave Nurse Kim money," Aisha said. "In an envelope. Then the nurse wrote that I had a fever. But I didn't. I was awake the whole time." Kenji's pulse quickened. St. Sakura Medical Tower wasn't just any hospital, it was his. And yet, here was his daughter telling him someone was falsifying her medical chart inside his own building. He tried to stay calm. "When did this happen?" "2 nights ago, around midnight. I saw May give her the envelope. Then the nurse came in and took my temperature, even though I was fine." Kenji's jaw tensed at the name. Mei Lu, his girlfriend, his rock, the woman who had helped him survive the darkest days after his wife's death. She had taken unpaid leave from her role at Tanaka Media to care for Aisha. She'd been steadfast, loyal, or so he thought. "And, Daddy," Aisha hesitated, her fingers curling into the edge of the blanket. "She also gave me these white pills. She said they were vitamins, but every time I took them, my head hurt, and I got dizzy." Kenji's expression darkened. "She gave you pills without telling me?" Aisha nodded slowly. "She said they'd help me sleep, but I didn't sleep. I just felt weird." He took a steadying breath. "Did you tell anyone?" "No one believed me. Nurse Kim just told me to rest and said it was part of my treatment. But I don't feel sick, Daddy. I feel fine until I take those pills." Kenji's chest tightened. May had approached him just days ago, suggesting he consider signing a temporary medical power of attorney, just in case something happened to him. "You've been through so much," she'd said, touching his hand gently. "If something happens again, someone has to be ready to act for Aisha." It had sounded like care. Now it sounded like a scheme. Aisha's voice pulled him back. "I drew what I saw," she said. "It's in my sketchbook." Kenji opened it with trembling fingers, flipping past drawings of lotus flowers and sunrises until he found the one she meant. A crude but striking bird's-eye view of her hospital room. 2 stick figures stood near her bed, labeled M and Nurse. A small envelope marked with yen symbols passed between them. In the corner, Aisha lay in bed, one eye open, watching. A chill ran down his spine. He looked at her again. "Why are you telling me this now?" Aisha swallowed hard. "Because if I don't, something worse might happen. I don't want to take those pills anymore, Daddy. And I don't want to go to that other hospital May keeps talking about." Kenji's heart pounded. Just days ago, May had casually mentioned transferring Aisha to a specialized pediatric center in Kyoto. At the time, it had felt like a thoughtful suggestion. Now, it felt like part of a larger plan. He touched Aisha's cheek. "Sweetheart, do you trust me?" She nodded. "Then rest, okay? I'll take care of this." As he stood, he looked out over the dimming skyline of Tokyo. The city lights flickered to life one by one, but all Kenji could think of was the shadow growing inside his own building, inside his own life. Aisha curled under the blanket again, her eyes never leaving him. Her soft but fierce voice lingered in his mind. This time, he would listen. Because sometimes the most dangerous lies are told not with words, but with silence and a smile. And sometimes justice begins with the voice of a child who dares to tell the truth. Kenji didn't sleep that night. After Aisha drifted off, still watching him like she was afraid to blink, he left the hospital room in silence. The corridors of St. Sakura Medical Tower were hushed at that hour, lit only by dim safety lights and the faint hum of machines. But Kenji's mind was ablaze. He walked with purpose toward the administrative wing, bypassing the elevator and taking the stairs. Each step hammered the same question into his head: had he let a predator into his daughter's life, into his hospital? He arrived at the staff-only access point and swiped his badge. The security office was small, tucked between records and human resources, but it had everything he needed: access logs, camera feeds, and full clearance. As the CEO, he rarely used these tools himself. Tonight, he would. The night security guard on duty, a gray-bearded man named Hiroshi who'd worked at the hospital for 18 years, looked up from his desk with surprise. "Mr. Tanaka, everything all right?" "I need access to surveillance footage," Kenji said. "Pediatric floor, room 521, past 7 nights, especially between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Hiroshi blinked. "That's Aisha's room, right?" Kenji didn't answer. He was already pulling up a chair beside Hiroshi, leaning toward the monitor. "Let's start with 2 nights ago." Hiroshi nodded and clicked through the system. The footage loaded, grainy but clear. Kenji watched Aisha's door intently. For the first hour, nothing happened. Nurses passed. A janitor rolled a mop bucket. Then, at 11:46 p.m., May appeared. Kenji's jaw tightened. She wore a gray coat over her blouse, clutching a slim envelope in one hand. She moved with intent, walking directly toward the nurse's station. There, she spoke to Nurse Kim, the night shift nurse assigned to Aisha. The conversation was quiet but deliberate. May leaned in, gestured with the envelope, while Kim kept glancing down the hallway. Then it happened. Kim reached out and took the envelope, hesitating visibly before slipping it into her uniform pocket. Kenji said nothing, just stared. Hiroshi paused the footage. "You want to see what happened next?" Kenji nodded. The next clip showed Kim entering Aisha's room around midnight. She carried what looked like a small cup, presumably with pills. She didn't check vitals or ask questions. She simply gave Aisha the cup and opened a chart. She stayed for barely 3 minutes, then exited and went straight to the nursing terminal, where she typed steadily for over 10 minutes. The timestamp matched the official record stating Maya had a 101.88-degree fever and signs of physical distress. Michael leaned back slowly, running both hands over his face. He had known deep down that Maya was telling the truth, but seeing it play out on screen drove a cold spike of guilt through his chest. "Earl," he said quietly, "keep a copy of this footage. Make it private and don't mention it to anyone." "You got it, boss." Michael left the security office with a hard set to his jaw. The pain wasn't just personal now. It was systemic. His daughter wasn't the only one at risk if someone like Veronica could manipulate protocol so easily. He needed answers fast. He walked to the pediatric wing's main desk where a young nurse named Kelsey was going through charts. "Excuse me," he said, lowering his voice. "Where's Nurse Mary Gonzalez these days?" Kelsey blinked. "Mary? She got reassigned to the cardiac wing last week. Something about performance issues." "Performance issues?" Michael frowned. "Mary's been with this hospital longer than some of the wallpaper." Kelsey shrugged. "That's what we were told. Administrative order." Michael thanked her and walked off, boiling inside. Mary had been Maya's favorite. Gentle, experienced, attentive. If someone wanted to hide changes in Mia's health, moving Mary off the floor made perfect sense. Back in his office, Michael sat at his desk and opened Mia's chart. He scrolled through recent entries, cross-checking data. Nurse Mary's final note 7 days ago was clear. Patient alert and responsive. No signs of fever or lethargy. Appetite normal. The next day, Peterson's notes began and the tone shifted sharply. Patient restless. Reports, stomach pain, temperature elevated, emotional distress. Observed. It was a completely different narrative, a fiction layered over reality. Then Michael opened the medication log. A prescription had been filled. Small white capsules labeled mild sedative pediatric use only. It had been requested by Peterson and approved. Not by a physician, but under a temporary advisory order authorized by Veronica. Michael's fist clenched. Veronica didn't have legal authority. She had used proximity and charm to bend hospital procedure to her will. This went beyond overreach. This was abuse. His phone buzzed. A message from Veronica. "Just checking in. Maya seemed off tonight. Maybe we should talk about moving up the Oregon transfer. She needs real help. Let's talk tomorrow." Michael stared at the message. His thumb hovered over reply, but he didn't type a word. Instead, he sat in silence, watching the lights of Chicago shimmer beyond his window. He was beginning to understand that Veronica's plan was deeper, colder, and more methodical than he had imagined. And yet, through it all, Maya had seen it first. She had known when the adults around her were lying. He thought of what she said before drifting off. "Justice isn't always loud, Daddy. Sometimes it whispers. If you believe that even the quietest voices deserve to be heard, tap like to support Maya. And don't forget to comment where you're watching this from. Who knows? Someone nearby might be watching with you right now." He had ignored whispers once before with Sarah. He would not do it again. By morning, he would start asking the kind of questions that made people sweat, and he'd start with Veronica. But for now, he opened his office drawer, took out the family photo Sarah had loved him, Maya, and her smiling on a beach in Cape Cod. He placed it on the desk beside Maya's drawing. 2 stick figures, 1 envelope, 1 open eye. He stared at it and whispered into the stillness. "I hear you, Maya." Then he turned off the lights because the next move was his. Michael returned to Maya's room just after 6 o'clock in the morning. The hallway was hushed, the soft shuffle of nurses and the Distant beep of monitors weaving a familiar rhythm. He stepped inside quietly, expecting to find his daughter asleep. But Maya was already sitting up in bed, legs crossed, sketchbook balanced on her knees, her tiny fingers clutched a crayon as she colored in the edges of a rough drawing. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, though her eyes still held a layer of weariness. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. "Hey, sweetheart," Michael said gently. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded. "Better than last night. I didn't take the pill." Michael sat in the chair beside her. His gaze flicked to the little bottle of vitamins still on the side table. It hadn't been touched. He exhaled with quiet relief. "What are you working on?" Maya turned the sketchbook toward him. "I finished the picture. The one I told you about." Michael took it from her, his hand steady, even as his heart picked up pace. The drawing was crude but unmistakably intentional. The layout of her hospital room was mapped out with surprising detail. The bed, the forestand, the window. 2 stick figures stood near the foot of the bed, one with long brown hair and a triangle dress. A speech bubble above her head read, "We need him to sign." The other stick figure was labeled, Nurse P. Between them, Maya had drawn a large rectangle, marked with tiny dollar signs, but it was the image of herself, small, curled up under the blanket with one eye wide open that stopped Michael cold. She'd even drawn a red pill beside her head labeled Sleepy. His chest tightened. "Do you remember what exactly Veronica said?" he asked softly. Maya looked down at the blanket and picked at a thread. "She told Nurse Peterson that I had to look really sick. That if I didn't, you might not sign the papers. She said, you were too stressed to make good choices." Michael clenched his jaw. "And the pills, did she say why she gave them to you?" "She said they'd help me rest. But after I took them, I felt floaty. Like I couldn't think, and my head buzzed." Kenji stood and walked to the window, his back to Aisha for a long moment. The city was waking up. Somewhere down below, joggers passed street vendors, and mothers packed bento boxes for school. But in this room, his daughter, a black Asian girl, had been drugged, lied to, used. And the worst part? He had almost missed it. He had almost trusted the wrong person again. Aisha's voice broke the silence. "You believe me now, right?" Kenji turned and looked at her. Truly looked. Her small face was too pale, her curls messier than usual, her shoulders hunched like someone twice her age. But her eyes, those eyes were sharp, alive, brave. "I believe you," he said. "And I'm going to fix it." A knock sounded on the door. May. She stepped in with a smile, dressed in her usual tailored slacks and a soft lavender blouse. In her arms, a small bouquet of white chrysanthemums. "Good morning, my loves," she chirped. "How's our patient feeling today?" Aisha's smile vanished. She slid the sketchbook under her blanket. Kenji noticed the subtle shift in her posture, like a flame shrinking from a gust of wind. "She's feeling much better," Kenji said, not bothering to hide the edge in his voice. "Bright, alert, and very awake." May blinked, caught off guard for a moment before her expression reset. "That's wonderful news." Though the night nurse mentioned some tossing and fever around midnight again. Poor thing. Aisha looked down, her hands suddenly clenched. Kenji didn't take his eyes off May. "Actually, I reviewed the overnight vitals. No fever, no signs of restlessness. In fact, the logs look a little too curated." May's smile faltered slightly. "Must be a discrepancy," she said smoothly. "I'll talk to the staff." "No need," Kenji replied calmly. "I've already scheduled a re-evaluation with Dr. Nakamura this morning." A fresh pair of eyes. "I think it's time we take another look at Aisha's case." May's voice tensed ever so slightly. "But Dr. Ito has been leading her care. Bringing in someone else could cause confusion." Kenji walked over to Aisha and picked up the sketchbook, still warm from her hands. He met May's gaze. "I think the confusion's already here." There was a flicker behind her eyes, not fear, not anger, but something colder, calculating. She stepped forward, placing the flowers in the vase on Aisha's side table. "Kenji," she said, her voice honeyed, "I know this has been overwhelming. You've been carrying so much since Emmy passed. You're tired. You're vulnerable. That's why I offered to help. You can't always do it alone." Kenji's stare didn't budge. "I'm not alone," he said. "Not anymore." May opened her mouth to speak again, but the words never came. Aisha, who had been silent the whole time, spoke up. "You gave me those pills," she said softly, looking straight at her. "You told me they'd help, but they made me feel fuzzy. I don't want to feel fuzzy anymore." The room fell still. May's hands curled ever so slightly. Kenji's voice cut through the silence. "We're done here, May." She stood still for a moment, her shoulders lifting like she might protest, but the look in Kenji's eyes held her back. She straightened her blouse, composed her expression. Of course, she said. I'll give you two some space. When the door closed behind her, Kenji sat beside Aisha again and took her small hand in his. You did good, kiddo, he whispered. You were brave. She looked at him, her voice barely audible. What happens now? Now, he said, holding up the sketchbook like a badge of honor, we follow the truth, wherever it leads. And in his chest, a vow was taking shape. No more assuming, no more delaying. If May thought her lies could bury the truth, she had just underestimated the wrong father and the wrong little girl. Kenji stood before the tinted glass wall of his corner office, watching the sun crest over the Tokyo skyline. The skyline had never looked so cold, a city he helped heal, now tainted by what had crept into his hospital and into his daughter's life. In his hand was Aisha's drawing, folded, worn, but damning. He turned back to his desk, where a laptop lay open with Aisha's full digital medical record displayed. He'd spent the last 2 hours reviewing every entry since her first admission, dates, times, medication logs, nursing notes. The pattern was clear now, painfully precise. The shift happened exactly when Nurse Hana Sato, Aisha's favorite and one of the hospital's most senior pediatric nurses, was reassigned. Hana's notes had been steady, clinical, realistic, patient alert, appetite normal, low anxiety. 3 days later, Nurse Kim's entries began, and the tone changed dramatically, patient lethargic, vomiting, fever spikes, recommending psych consult. Every escalation was signed off by someone under May's shadow. Kenji dialed the staff directory, his finger hovering before selecting Hana's extension. He needed the truth, someone who had watched Aisha without being influenced. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Sato, the voice said, a little tired, a little cautious. Hana, it's Kenji Tanaka. Oh, sir, she replied, wary. Everything all right with Aisha? She misses you, he said. So do I. Hana sighed. They said I was too close to the patient, that I'd formed an emotional bias. But Aisha wasn't sick, Mr. Tanaka. She was grieving. She needed stability, not medication. Kenji felt his jaw tighten. You ever questioned the pills she was given? I did. I flagged it quietly. Next day, I was transferred. That was enough. Hana, he said, voice steady, I need you to meet me this afternoon. Quietly. Bring your notes, your original assessments, anything that wasn't uploaded to the shared record. I still have them, she said immediately. I'll be there. He ended the call and rose from his chair. If this was going where he thought it was, he'd need more than personal conviction. He needed legal proof, and someone who knew the systems better than anyone. There was only one name that came to mind, Taro Yamada. Taro had retired 3 years ago from his role as Director of System Security at Tanaka Care, but he still dropped by weekly to check on old friends. The man had an uncanny sense of pattern recognition and an obsession with clean data trails. Kenji called him. Morning, Kenji, Taro answered. That's a rare call. I need your help, Kenji said. It's about Aisha. And about May. Taro didn't ask for context. When do we meet? Kenji gave him the time and place, then leaned back in his chair, staring at the silent blinking cursor on the screen. He opened a new tab and typed medical power of attorney, Japan forgery statute. Something in Kenji's gut told him the documents May presented weren't just unethical, they were criminal. That afternoon, Taro met him in the hospital cafe's back corner booth, away from curious eyes. Taro was in his 70s now, slower to rise, but sharp as ever. His suit was pressed, his hearing aid barely visible, and his expression unreadable as always. Kenji slid Aisha's drawing across the table first. Taro studied it, silent. Then Kenji opened the laptop and showed the logs, the discrepancies, the contradictions in nursing entries, the drug administration logs linked to patient notes, and the activity from the nurse station terminals. Taro's brow furrowed. This is a coordinated effort, he said at last. Someone scrubbed the audit trail. See here, these access logs are too clean. No one logs in and out of these systems this consistently without leaving Messier metadata. Can you retrieve the original inputs? Kenji asked. Taro smirked. I archived this system's autosync redundancy protocol myself 5 years ago. No one even remembers it exists. He leaned forward. Give me 12 hours. Make it 6, Kenji said. Taro nodded. You'll have it. Later that evening, Kenji arrived back in Aisha's room. She was working on another drawing, this time of a cherry blossom tree with a swing tied to one branch, a sun beaming in the corner. She looked up and smiled. Did you talk to Nurse Hana? I did, Kenji said. She's going to help us. Aisha's eyes brightened, then dimmed slightly. May came back earlier when you were gone. Kenji's spine straightened. What did she say? She said Dr. Ito wants me to go to a new hospital, one where they can look at my brain better. Kenji sat slowly, hands clenched. Did she say where? She said it's called Sakura View in Kyoto. Sakura View. Kenji knew the name, a private facility specializing in long-term pediatric care. Discreet, expensive, often used in contentious custody or medical cases. If Aisha were transferred there, May would have full control. He looked at her small face, the worry in her eyes. I'm not going anywhere, right? She asked. No, Kenji said. Not without me, and not without the truth coming out. She smiled. Good, 'cause I like Nurse Hannah better anyway. He laughed softly, then held her hand. But inside, he was already preparing. May was escalating, speeding up the timeline, pushing the transfer before too many questions were asked. She was making her move, which meant it was his turn next. He reached into his coat and pulled out the signed appointment order for Dr. Haruka Nakamura, a third-party pediatric specialist known for her independence and integrity. She would review Aisha's case first thing in the morning. No one had notified May. Let her be surprised. Let her understand that power games don't work when the truth is louder than manipulation. As he turned off the lights and kissed Aisha's forehead, Kenji whispered a promise. I hear you, Aisha. And this time, I'm not backing down. The next morning, Kenji arrived at the hospital before dawn. He carried a sealed envelope stamped with the official Tanaka Care insignia. Inside was a formal authorization for Dr. Haruka Nakamura to conduct a full independent review of Aisha's case without interference. The order was signed and time-stamped, legally binding. Kenji wanted no gaps, no delays. He passed the front desk with a nod, took the elevator to the pediatric wing, and stepped into the hallway outside room 521. The door was open. His heart dropped. The bed was empty, the sheets pulled back neatly, the pillow still indented where Aisha's head had rested. Her drawing pad was gone. Her little blue panda plush, always curled under one arm, was missing. He turned quickly toward the nurse's station. Excuse me, where's Aisha-chan? The nurse on duty blinked up at him. She was new, he hadn't seen her before. I believe she was transferred this morning, sir. Around 6 o'clock. Kenji felt his chest constrict. Transferred? By whose order? The nurse hesitated, then typed rapidly into the terminal. It says here the transfer was authorized by her medical power of attorney. Miss Mei Lu. The destination is Sakura View Pediatric Center, Kyoto. Emergency evaluation request due to neurological concerns. No, Kenji said, his voice low and deadly. That's not possible. I never signed any power of attorney. The nurse's eyes widened. But it's in the system, a digital copy of the signed form, time-stamped yesterday evening at 8:32 p.m. Kenji's breath caught. He had been with Aisha at that exact time, reading her a bedtime story. He took a step back. Lock every entrance. Notify security now. No one was authorized to move my daughter. The nurse grabbed the phone, trembling, while Kenji stormed toward the elevator. He dialed Hiroshi, the night security manager. Hiroshi, where the hell was our guard posted outside Aisha's room? A pause. Sir, I was told you canceled that request. By who? You, Hiroshi said cautiously. A call came in from someone using your credentials at 4 a.m. said the guard was needed in the ER. Kenji didn't respond for a moment, then whispered, she used my voice. May had access to voice memos, recordings, probably enough to mimic his tone. The thought made his skin crawl. Hiroshi, he barked, I want camera footage from every hallway between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. I want timestamps, every exit log, and a full sweep of our outbound transport manifests. Now. He hung up, then immediately called Detective Aiko Mori, an investigator he'd worked with on internal hospital matters years ago. Detective, my daughter has been abducted under false medical pretenses. We believe her records were falsified, my signature forged, and she's en route to Kyoto. Do you have proof? Mori asked, already typing. Yes, but we'll need to intercept the transfer in motion. Send me the name of the facility. I'll coordinate with Kyoto Prefectural Police. Do not make direct contact until I secure a warrant. Kenji ended the call and gripped the edge of the nurse's station to keep himself steady. The world tilted slightly, not from panic, but from rage. May had planned this for weeks, maybe months, the falsified data, the bribes, the pills, all leading to this. May hadn't just wanted access to Aisha's trust fund or the insurance payouts. She wanted control. 2 hours later, Kenji sat in his office, the lights off, his phone buzzing on the desk. Taro Yamada stepped inside quietly, holding a USB drive. I found everything, the older man said. And you're not going to like it. Kenji inserted the drive and opened the files. There were archived logs, deep system records hidden from regular staff access. A sequence of entries showed repeated manual overrides to Aisha's vitals, starting 2 weeks ago: blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, all inflated in sync with Nurse Kim's shifts. Then came the drug records, a mild sedative replaced by a compound Kenji didn't recognize. Taro had flagged it, zetrophenol D, an off-label drug used in trauma research, not approved for children. His hands trembled. "They gave this to her," he said. "Not legally," Taro replied. "Not under her chart, but it was listed under a general batch code for pediatric supplements." Kenji stared at the screen. Every line, every log screamed conspiracy. "She moved Aisha before we could finish the evaluation. She knew we were closing in." Taro's eyes narrowed. "She's confident. Probably thinks she's covered every track." Kenji sat back in his chair, fists clenched. "We need to outmaneuver her. Not just stop the transport, we need evidence to prosecute." Taro nodded, already working on a chain of custody map. "But there's more." He slid a printout across the desk, handwritten notes from May's file folder, found on a shared drive Taro had accessed under administrator override. Kenji read silently. "Once he signs POA, fast-track transfer. Sakura View will bill full 6-month protocol. Insurance confirmed. Target authorization 90 million yen to 140 million yen range. Access through Aisha's trust fund via guardianship clause requires ER diagnosis plus psych escalation." Kenji whispered, "My God." Taro said softly, "She's turning your daughter into a diagnosis, a product." Kenji stood, every muscle taut. "Not anymore." The next alert came from Kyoto. Detective Mori called. "We intercepted the transport at a private airfield just outside Kyoto. Aisha's safe. She's being evaluated now. The medical staff at Sakura View have been cooperative. They were told you authorized everything." "Where's May?" "She slipped away before the transport was grounded, but we'll find her. For now, Aisha's safe." Kenji sat down, closing his eyes. For the first time in 24 hours, he allowed himself a breath. Aisha was safe, but it wasn't over. May had made one last move, but the endgame hadn't played out. And when it did, he'd be ready, because now the world knew what she was capable of. And so did he. The sun had already dropped below the skyline when Kenji arrived at the safe house where Aisha was temporarily relocated. It was a modest ryokan-style cabin on the outskirts of Kamioka, far removed from Tokyo's bustle and, more importantly, beyond May's reach. He stepped out of the car, the silence around him almost too fragile to touch. His shoes crunched lightly on the gravel path, and every step toward the front door carried the weight of the last 72 hours. Inside, the air smelled of tatami and green tea. The nurse assigned to Aisha looked up from the low table where she was reading. "She's in the back room, still sleeping, but more peacefully now. No medication, just rest." Kenji nodded, walked quietly down the hallway, and opened the sliding door. There she was. Aisha, a black Asian girl, lay curled beneath a soft indigo blanket, her Tokyo Giants hoodie bunched at the shoulders, her cheek pressed against a pillow damp with the remnants of tears. Her small hand clutched the worn-out panda plush close to her chest. Kenji crouched beside the bed and watched her breathe. For a moment, he didn't need to be a billionaire, a strategist, or a fighter. He was just a father. And she was just a little girl who had survived something no child ever should. His voice was barely a whisper. "Daddy's here now." She stirred, eyelids fluttering. When her gaze met his, something broke softly, quietly, like a crack running through old porcelain. "Am I still in trouble?" she asked. Kenji's chest clenched. "No, sweetheart. You're safe. You're not in trouble." She nodded slowly. "I heard them talk about the pills, about the hospital wanting to keep me. Was it because I wasn't normal?" Kenji sat on the edge of the bed and gently brushed a curl from her forehead. "It was because someone wanted to use you to hurt me, but that's over now. I promise." Aisha didn't answer. Instead, she reached under the pillow and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this in May's purse. The day she left the envelope for the nurse." Kenji opened it, expecting a receipt or transfer slip. It was a typed letter, dated 2 weeks ago. "To whom it may concern, upon completion of transfer, patient Aisha-chan will be admitted under guardian Lu's authority for advanced treatment. The institution will receive 110 million yen in staged release through the Sakura Evergreen Trust. Compliance with patient sedation and limited visitor policy is expected. Breach of discretion voids payment. Sincerely, M. Lu." Kenji's fingers tightened on the paper. He didn't just have conspiracy, he had motive, money trail, and documented intent. It wasn't about uncertainty anymore. It was about proof. He turned to Aisha. "Why didn't you show this to the nurse?" Her eyes lowered. "I didn't think anyone would believe me. Grown-ups always listen to the ones who smile big and wear nice clothes." Kenji wrapped his arms around her. You did more than anyone. You told the truth, and now that truth is going to change everything. The next morning, back in Tokyo, Kenji met with his legal advisor, Noriko Hayashi, in his downtown office. The rain tapped softly against the glass as Noriko spread out a series of documents. We have everything we need, she said. With the letter, the forged authorization, and the tampered records, we can file a formal injunction and criminal complaint. I've spoken to the public prosecutor's office. They're very interested. Kenji leaned back. How soon can we move? Today. Be prepared, May won't go down quietly. She'll claim mental illness, emotional duress, even romantic betrayal if she has to. Kenji exhaled slowly. Let her try. Noriko hesitated, then added, there's something else. We traced the funding source of the Sakura Evergreen Trust. It's not her money. He looked up. It was created by a shell company under your name. His blood ran cold. Mine? Yes. Years ago, you signed off on a generic charitable fund meant to cover anonymous medical expenses. It was buried in your old portfolio from Global Hope Initiative. May repurposed it without you noticing. Kenji stood abruptly, pacing the room. She's been preparing this since before Aisha even got sick. Noriko nodded. Which means this wasn't spontaneous. It was calculated. Step by step. He stopped, eyes burning. Then we calculate back. Later that day, Detective Aiko Mori called with new updates. We located the nurse May paid off. She's already confessed. Said she was promised a promotion and a housing stipend. Is she willing to testify with immunity? Yes. Good. And what about May? Still off-grid, but not for long. We got a hit on her burner phone in a hotel near Yamanashi Valley. We're narrowing it down. Kenji ended the call and stared at the skyline. His phone buzzed again, this time from the hospital board. Several members were asking questions. Rumors were starting. He welcomed it. Let them wonder. Let them squirm. As he returned to the cabin later that night, Aisha sat at the kitchen table with a coloring book. The television was off. Her panda lay next to a glass of warm milk. She looked up at him. Did you catch the bad guys? Not yet, he said with a smile. But we're getting closer. She looked serious. If they come here, will you still be here, too? Kenji crouched beside her and took her hand. I'll be here before they ever get the chance. And as she wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his collar, he knew that every lie May told was about to be burned away by one thing she could never fake, truth. Spoken from the voice of a little girl no one thought would matter. Until now. The air in Yamanashi Valley was crisper than usual for early fall, and the sprawling vineyard seemed to glow gold under the late afternoon sun. But for Kenji, there was no time to admire the scenery. His eyes were fixed on the nondescript ivy-draped villa ahead, May's hideout. She booked it under a false name, Aiko whispered from the passenger seat of the black sedan. But we traced the reservation through the burner phone. Surveillance shows she checked in 2 nights ago. Alone. Kenji nodded, jaw tight. Let's finish this. They moved with quiet precision. A second unmarked vehicle circled the rear of the property while Aiko and Kenji approached the front. Aiko knocked gently once, then twice. No answer. She reached for her badge and slowly pushed the door open. The scent of lavender and sake wafted out, blending strangely with the stale tension that hung in the air. May, Aiko called out, voice firm but calm. It's Detective Mori with the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. We need to speak with you. A soft noise came from the upper floor, something like a drawer shutting hastily. Aiko's hand went to her holster. Kenji followed close behind her as they ascended the stairs. In the master bedroom, May stood at the vanity, her back to them, brushing her hair like nothing was wrong. She didn't flinch as Aiko stepped into view. Instead, she met them in the mirror with a faint, almost amused smile. Well, she said, her voice smooth as silk. I suppose this day had to come. Aiko didn't smile. You're under arrest for conspiracy, child endangerment, falsifying medical records, and attempted custodial interference. May set the brush down. That's quite a mouthful. We have the nurse's statement. We have the bank records, and we have the letter, Kenji added coldly. The one you left in your purse. May finally turned, eyes narrowing. So she gave it to you. Little Aisha, always watching, always pretending to be weak. Kenji stepped forward, anger seeping through every word. She was never pretending. You drugged her. You stole from a child just to punish me. Punish? May laughed bitterly. No, Kenji. I was teaching you. You handed over your legacy, your fortune, your name to a child that's not even yours. What did you expect me to do? Applaud you? Aiko moved to cuff her. But May didn't resist. As the cold metal clicked around her wrists, she whispered, You'll thank me one day when she turns on you, too. Kenji stared at her, no longer with anger, but pity. She already had every reason to, but she didn't. That's the difference between you and her. 2 days later, back in Tokyo, the news had spread like wildfire. Billionaire CEO's ex-fiancé arrested in shocking plot against his daughter, blared from screens in airports, lobbies, and living rooms. But Kenji refused interviews. He had only one priority: restoring Aisha's health and her trust. In the kitchen of their new home just outside Inoshima Island, Aisha sat at the breakfast table with her coloring book again. This time, her hands weren't shaking. She was humming a low, soft tune that Kenji recognized. Her mother used to hum it too. I saw her on television, Aisha said without looking up. She didn't cry. She won't, Kenji replied, sliding a plate of blueberry pancakes in front of her. Some people cry only when it benefits them. She picked up a piece with her fork. Will she go to jail forever? That's not up to me, he said gently. But what matters is she can't hurt you anymore. There was a long pause before Aisha asked, will she hurt other people? Kenji looked at her, really looked, and realized she wasn't just afraid for herself. She was thinking about the nurse, about the little kids in hospital wings, about people who don't have a voice. Not if we tell the truth, he said. Not if we speak loud enough that they can't pretend not to hear us. She nodded once, and for the first time since all of this began, she smiled. Not a broken smile, but one that reached her eyes. Later that afternoon, Kenji sat in the boardroom of the Tanaka Hope Foundation, the charitable arm of his company, named in part for Aisha's mother. This time, the meeting wasn't about expansion or strategy. It was personal. We're creating a new fund, he announced, dedicated to whistleblowers in pediatric care, doctors, nurses, even children, anyone who's been silenced. We're naming it the Aisha Chen Initiative. The room fell silent. One of the board members, an older woman with silver hair and warm eyes, leaned forward. Does Aisha know? She will, Kenji said. Tonight. He returned home just as the sun began to set. Aisha was on the porch, watching the waves. Her panda sat in her lap, ears flopped over the armrest. Kenji sat beside her. There's something I want to show you, he said, pulling out a small blue folder. Inside the small blue folder was a single document, beautifully printed, framed with gold leaf edges. At the top, the Aisha Chen Initiative. Aisha's eyes scanned the words, her fingers trembling. You named it after me? Because you were brave, Kenji said, and because there are others who need someone brave enough to speak up. Her voice cracked. But I was scared the whole time. Kenji wrapped his arm around her. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to do what's right, even when you're terrified. Aisha looked out over the water. Can I help with it? Like visit kids or talk to people? He smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of salt and cedar. Aisha leaned her head on Kenji's shoulder. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a broken piece of someone else's story. She felt whole, seen, heard. Tomorrow would still hold shadows. But tonight, there was light. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the Tanaka Hope Foundation's newly opened downtown outreach center. Aisha stood near the front door, her hair pulled back neatly, her small hands clutching a folder of hand-drawn cards. She had insisted on delivering them personally to the pediatric wing of the local hospital, her own way of giving hope back to kids like her. Kenji stood beside her, watching her talk to the receptionist. Her voice was polite but steady, so unlike the trembling little girl who had once clung to her stuffed panda under harsh fluorescent lights. The transformation in Aisha hadn't gone unnoticed. Local papers were beginning to call her the little girl who spoke truth. While Kenji hated the spotlight, he couldn't deny the power of her story. He only hoped it didn't bring more trouble. The receptionist picked up the phone. Yes, she's here with her father. I'll send them up. Father. Kenji still wasn't used to the word on someone else's lips. But each time Aisha said it, even casually, it felt like a silent thread stitching something long torn inside him. They rode the elevator in silence, Aisha humming softly again, that same melody her mother used to hum. It had become a comfort to him, too. As the doors opened on the 4th floor, a nurse waited at the end of the hallway. Not just any nurse, Sana Kim, the woman from May's plan. Her eyes were red-rimmed and weary, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sleeves. She had asked to meet them in person. Aisha stopped, her smile fading. Kenji stepped forward protectively. Sana's voice was brittle. Mr. Tanaka, Aisha, thank you for coming. Kenji's tone was firm. You said you had more to say. Sana nodded and gestured to an empty family room nearby. They entered, and the door closed behind them. She didn't sit. I've turned in everything, bank records, email printouts, even the dummy prescriptions. The prosecutor has all of it now, Sana said. But I needed to look her in the eyes and say this. She turned to Aisha. You were never sick. Not the way we said. I lied because I was afraid of losing my job. May made me believe she was protecting you, even when everything felt wrong. But I still gave you those pills. I saw you cry. I saw the headaches, and I said nothing. Aisha didn't speak. Her eyes filled slowly with tears. I'm sorry, Sanaa whispered, her voice cracking. I can't undo what I did, but I'll never stop trying to make it right. Kenji watched his daughter. She didn't run. She didn't hide. Instead, she walked slowly to the couch, sat down, and spoke with a quiet power that made Sanaa freeze. Were you scared of her? Sanaa blinked. Yes. Aisha looked down at her hands. Me, too. There was no anger in her voice, just a sad, heavy understanding that only a child forced to grow up too soon could offer. I forgive you, she said. But please don't stay quiet if it happens again. Sanaa burst into quiet sobs. Kenji reached into his coat and placed a slim folder on the table. That's a formal statement from our legal team. If you're willing, you can testify anonymously in the upcoming hearings. We'll protect you. Sanaa nodded, clutching the folder like a lifeline. Back at home that night, Aisha sat by the window, rain trailing down the glass in thin silver lines. She stared at the street lamps outside, silent. Kenji brought her a cup of chamomile tea, no sugar, just like she liked now. He placed it on the side table and sat across from her. She looked so tired. She said she was sorry, Aisha finally said. Kenji nodded. Guilt weighs people down more than truth ever could. She said she was scared. But I don't understand why grown-ups let fear make them mean. He leaned forward. Because fear can be louder than kindness if you let it. That's why people like you matter. Aisha turned to face him. Do you think people can change? I do, Kenji said softly. But only when they face what they've done and choose to be better. Aisha considered that. Then I hope she does. The next morning, Kenji received a call from a national broadcast network. They had caught wind of the Aisha-chan initiative and wanted to feature her on their primetime special, Voices That Changed Lives. He hesitated at first. But when he brought it up to Aisha, her reaction surprised him. If I tell my story, she said, maybe some other kid will speak up, too. Maybe they won't have to wait so long like I did. Kenji studied her face. There was no ego, just a quiet, growing strength he hadn't fully seen before. His heart swelled with both pride and sorrow. She should have had a childhood free from these burdens. We'll do it on your terms, he said. No cameras unless you say yes. No questions you don't want to answer. She smiled. Okay. On the day of filming, Aisha wore a simple green dress and held her panda in her lap, even though she hadn't touched it in weeks. The interviewer, a kind-eyed woman named Yumi, knelt beside her before they started. If anything feels too hard, Yumi said gently, just squeeze my hand. We'll stop right away. Aisha nodded. The cameras rolled, lights glowed softly, and as questions began, Aisha told her story, not as a victim, but as a witness to what happens when no one listens to children. She spoke about the strange pills, about hiding her headaches, about pretending to sleep when May checked her pulse. She described the nurse, the fear, the moment she saw Kenji crying and realized she had to speak. When Yumi asked her what made her say the words that changed everything, Aisha answered simply, I didn't want him to hurt anymore, and I didn't want to keep hurting either. The room went still. Kenji, watching off camera, swallowed hard. For all the power and money he had, nothing had ever moved people like his daughter's truth did now. Later that evening, as they sat in the living room, Aisha climbed onto the couch beside him. Her head rested lightly on his shoulder. I think Mom would be proud, she said quietly. Kenji's voice caught. She'd be more than proud. She'd see herself in you. Aisha smiled. And for the first time in a long time, her laughter returned, light, free, and full of hope. Tomorrow they would face the hearings. Tomorrow there would be more questions, more noise. But for tonight, their story was one of healing, and the silence between them was finally filled with peace. The courthouse was nothing like the sterile boardrooms Kenji Tanaka was used to. The ceilings were high, but the air felt dense, as though every lie ever spoken within its walls had settled into the tatama-patterned floors. Cameras clustered outside the steps, reporters calling Aisha's name, but security guided them swiftly through the back entrance. Aisha, a black Asian girl, walked beside Kenji in a navy yukata-style cardigan and black flats. She clutched a single folded sheet of paper in her small hand, her own prepared statement. Are you sure you want to do this? Kenji asked her one final time. Aisha didn't look up. If I don't, May will keep doing it to someone else. Kenji nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. His daughter was more than brave. She was resolute. Inside the chamber, rows of unfamiliar faces lined the benches, lawyers, journalists, even members of the public, all here to witness the final hearing into the fraudulent child medical records orchestrated by Mei Lu. The judge, a weathered Japanese woman in her 60s named Judge Sato, presided with the kind of presence that silenced the room without a word. When Mei was led into the courtroom, there was a collective shift in energy. She wore a charcoal gray suit, her black hair pulled into a tight bun, her expression unreadable. But Kenji saw it, the twitch at the corner of her mouth, the subtle pull of her jaw. Fear. Not the kind of fear Aisha had felt. No, this was fear of exposure, of the collapse of her carefully constructed mask. The prosecution opened with methodical precision. They laid out the timeline, the false diagnoses, the bribery, the forged prescriptions. Then they brought forward the documents, emails from Mei instructing Nurse Sana to administer unnecessary medications, internal messages between Mei and a private physician with a falsified signature. This was not medical misjudgment, the prosecutor said. This was premeditated abuse for control, for financial leverage, for pure ego. Then came the witnesses. Sana Kim was first. She took the stand with trembling hands and a trembling voice, but her words were clear. She recounted the day Mei handed her the first envelope of cash, how she hesitated, and how she convinced herself she was doing the right thing. But the truth, Sana said, choking up, is that I harmed a child because I was too afraid to lose my job. Gasps rippled across the room. The defense tried to discredit her, but it was weak. Their strategy shifted when Aisha was called to testify. Every camera lens turned. Aisha walked to the stand, chin lifted, panda in hand, not for show, but because it still made her feel safe. Judge Sato leaned forward slightly as Aisha took her oath. The room held its breath. Tell us, Aisha, the prosecutor said gently. Why are you here today? Aisha unfolded her paper slowly. Her voice was steady, not loud, but unwavering. Because people should know what she did. Not just to me, but to what it means to trust grown-ups. I was sick, but not in my body. I was made to feel sick so someone else could look powerful. That's not right. The judge's eyes softened. Mei's defense attorney objected, claiming emotional manipulation, but the judge overruled it. Let her speak, Judge Sato said. Aisha continued, this time not reading. I used to think maybe I did something wrong, that maybe I deserved to feel tired and scared. But then Daddy showed me that truth doesn't have to be loud to be strong. Her gaze drifted toward Mei. You didn't just lie to doctors, you lied to me, and that hurt more than the pills. Silence, then sniffles. Even some of the reporters looked down at their notepads, unable to meet the girl's eyes. After Aisha stepped down, Kenji was next. His testimony wasn't dramatic. It was measured, powerful in its restraint. I didn't believe her at first, he admitted. And for that, I'll carry guilt for the rest of my life. But when I did believe her, I realized how many others never had the chance to be heard. When it was Mei's turn, she took the stand with practiced poise. But this time, the mask didn't hold. The prosecutor's questions cut deeper. Her answers grew clipped. And then the moment everything changed, when asked why she gave Aisha pills, Mei said, I was trying to help her manage her anxiety. She was clearly unstable. A collective murmur moved through the court. Aisha flinched. Judge Sato's gavel hit the desk once. You do not get to label the victim in your own scheme, the judge said sharply. One more mischaracterization, and I will hold you in contempt. The verdict came later that afternoon. Mei Lu was found guilty on multiple counts, child endangerment, fraud, obstruction of justice, and medical malpractice. She was sentenced to 18 years without parole. Her assets were frozen, her reputation destroyed, but most importantly, her power to silence others was gone. As the gavel fell one final time, the room exhaled. Outside, the sky had cleared. Aisha and Kenji stood on the steps together, facing a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. But before they stepped forward, Aisha tugged his sleeve. Can we just go home? She asked. Kenji smiled. Absolutely. He placed a hand on her back as they turned away from the frenzy. That night, there was no celebration, just peace. Aisha curled up on the couch with a blanket, sipping tea, watching an old Japanese film Kenji had loved as a kid. At one point, she looked over and said, Do you think anyone else is going to try to do what she did? Kenji paused. Maybe, but you made it a lot harder for them. Aisha nodded. Then it was worth it. In the quiet that followed, Kenji realized something. Aisha hadn't just survived. She had changed the landscape for others like her. Her voice, once silenced by fear and medication, now echoed far beyond that courtroom. A little girl had warned a billionaire.